Welcome to ePathshala. I am Dr. Vishal Jadhav, Department of Sociology, Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapeeth, Pune. Today, we are going to look at a module titled Precursors of Modern European Sociology, the Sociology of Ibn Khaldun. This module comes under the paper Classical Sociological Theory. In this module, we are going to discuss how a 14th century Bedouin called Ibn Khaldun tried to understand the society of his time through various sources of history, polity, economy, culture and sociology. He tried to understand how social cohesion and social disorganization took place in societies and how this process was more or less a circular affair. How after large populations migrated and how these migrated populations, when they began to settle down and lead a domesticated life, led to the rise of empires and civilizations, and over a period of time how these civilizations began to deteriorate and finally how they began to wane. This whole phenomena he understood through a social science perspective. Waliuddin Abu Zaid Abdur Rahman Muhammad, popularly known as Ibn Khaldun, is accepted by many modern writers as one of the most important Muslim historiographers, scholars and sociologists, and as such making him as one of the greatest Muslim thinkers of the 14th century. He was considered as the pioneer or a precursor in the science of society, founder of modern sociology and the philosophy of history. While he is well known in both the Muslim world and the West, he has been seen more of a precursor of the various social sciences and as source of historical data and information, rather than as a source for the development of theoretical perspectives. Despite the fact that social thinking exists within humanity from the very beginning, however, the study of human communities has not become a topic for science until a later stage. Here, Ibn Khaldun was known since the concepts, subject matters and aims of sociology were first identified by him, who put the basics of this new science and innovated it. Concerning the discipline of sociology, he conceived a dynamic theory of history that involved conceptualizations of social conflict and social change, which is contained in his work Muqaddimah, later translated as prolegomena in Latin as the concept of asabiyya, which we call nationalism in today's modern context. This was perhaps the first work to advance social scientific reasoning on social cohesion and social conflict. Social cohesion or group solidarity or tribalism arises spontaneously in tribes and other small kinship groups. This module presents Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah, especially the concept of asabiyya, which is closely linked with the 7 branches of a modern sociology. We will discuss succinctly its framework such as human civilization, which is tantamount to public sociology, Bedouin civilization, dynasty, royal authority and the caliphate, which is equivalent to political sociology, sedentary civilization on the various aspects of making a living such as profit and crafts, which is equivalent to economic sociology, and the various kinds of sciences, which is now the sociology of education. The introduction to Muqaddimah. The Muqaddimah or the prolegomena was based on Ibn Khaldun's unique approach and the original contribution, and became a masterpiece in literature and philosophy of history and sociology. He wrote in 1377 in the short period of 5 months, which secluded at a place of Sultan Abu Hamu near Tujin. Franz Rosenthal, the translator of Ibn Khaldun's original work, the Muqaddimah, an introduction to history, best describe the work as rational in its approach, analytical in its method, encyclopedic in detail, and it represents almost complete departure from traditional historiography, discarding conventional concepts and cliches and seeking beyond the mere chronicle of events or an explanation of history. The chief concern of this monumental work was to identify psychological, economic, environmental, and social facts that contribute to the advancement of human civilization and the currents of history. In this context, he analyzed the dynamics of group relationships and showed how group feelings, al-asabiyya, give rise to the ascent of a new civilization and political power, and how later on its diffusion into a more general civilization invites the advent of a still new asabiyya in its pristine form. He developed a cyclic theory based on merging of al-asabiyya, a group, national or tribal enthusiasm in those who dwell on the periphery of great civilizations. This gave peoples power and energy beyond the numbers and allowed them to conquer the most civilized and elite cities. However, the conquerors in turn were softened by civilization and vulnerable to further conquest. Asabiyya. Asabiyya has meanings of binding, connecting, folding, and preconceiving. It derives from asabiyat, and tasab derives from same roots, which means safeguarding, protecting, helping. Again, from same root is used in Arabic to mean they gathered around the man and helped him. Frank Rosenthal translated the concept of asabiyya as a group feeling, and in the whole translation of the Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun uses the term asabiyya to describe the bond of cohesion among humans in a group forming community. The bond asabiyya exists at a level of civilization, from nomadic society to states and empires. Asabiyya is the most strong in the nomadic phase and decreases as civilizations advance. And this asabiyya declines, another more compelling asabiyya may take its place. The civilizations rise and fall, and history describes these cycles of asabiyya as they play out. The cycle of asabiyya is clearly described by Ibn Khaldun when he speaks of dynasties and governance. He argues that each dynasty has within itself the seed of its own downfall. He explains that the ruling houses tend to emerge on the peripheries of great empires and use the unity presented by those areas to their advantage in order to bring about a change in leadership. As the new rulers establish themselves at the center of their empire, they become increasingly sloppy and more concerned with maintaining their lifestyles. Thus, a new dynasty can engage at the periphery of their control and effect a change in leadership, beginning the cycle anew. Human civilization and its relation to public sociology. The Muqaddimah is an exposition of the patterns of human relationships in connection with environment. Ibn Khaldun studied phenomena in human society and the rules they follow. He gives general information about human civilization through making generalizations over people in accordance with different reasons. Sometimes he explains the influence of climate on character of people, and sometimes the abundance of or scarcity of food. He also mentions about the various types of human beings who have supernatural perception, either through their natural disposition or through exercise, preceded by a discussion of inspiration and dream visions. In his theory, Ibn Khaldun talks about human needs. He recognizes that human needs are derived from the nature of man. Man needs to eat and drink. He also has to have clothes and find a place to live. So there are some natural needs due to the very nature of man. These needs may have to be termed as elementary and basic. The desire to fulfill these needs results in a further use of his knowledge and intellect. Therefore, secondary needs arise. Tools are used as weapons as the intellect gets the needed things. A step after this in the process of civilization. At this stage, a human would lose life for luxuries. For this, he would have to be more intelligent. As a result, civilization advances. It must also be kept in mind that Khaldun never meant that civilization is solely based on material needs. So, the development of needs result in the advancement of civilization. Bedouin civilization. Ibn Khaldun revealed the characteristics of Bedouin civilization after a thorough study and observation, and declared that it is the origin and ancestor of urban civilization. His main concern is over Bedouins and sedentary people over Arab and Muslim character of his region and time. According to him, both groups are natural because they are result of natural organizations. He writes, "It should be known that differences of condition among people are the result of the different ways in which they make their living. Social organization enables them to cooperate towards that end, to start with the simple necessities of life before they get to conveniences and luxuries." Despite both groups which are natural, Ibn Khaldun states that Bedouins are superior to sedentary people in many respects, such as courage, because sedentary people become used to laziness and ease, and their reliance on law destroys their fortitude and power of resistance, and goodness, because sedentary people are much concerned with all kinds of pleasures. They are accustomed to luxury and success in worldly occupations and to indulge in worldly desires. However, it doesn't mean that Ibn Khaldun prefers Bedouin life in every way over urban civilization, as it may seem to be. On the other hand, according to Heinrich Simon, it is on the contrary, as Ibn Khaldun sees the double face of the cultural stages. In the first stage is the moral austerity and the bravery of Bedouins, coupled with the low living standards and with low material and civilizational level. And the second stage is of the urban civilization, the stage of wealth and comfort and of cultural bloom. It is simultaneously the decadence finally ruins it. Furthermore, Muhammad Dawoodi said that the simplicity of the Bedouin society can be traced to the material scarcity which characterizes it. The Bedouin does not usually possess more than the necessary material possessions which fulfill his daily needs and guarantee his survival. Furthermore, the presence of strong al-asabiyya and courage, the readiness to adopt religious beliefs, and the capacity to preserve the innate goodness of human nature are seen, on the one hand, as features of the simple type of human society. On the other hand, the complexity of the sedentary society is fundamentally induced by the society's materialistic affluence. Bedouin-based al-asabiyya appears in the affluent society to take other forms, such as common interest. Ibn Khaldun confirms that both religiosity and bravery are greatly undermined by sedentary environmental conditions. As such, economic factors play a crucial role in shaping society's character and lifestyle. According to Ibn Khaldun, the sedentary phase of Arab's society evolution is associated with the ultimate decline of civilization. Affluence and luxury, also called al-taraf, create many social and non-social ills. Among them is what is called by modern sociologists the sociological breakdown of societies. Dynasties, royal authority, and the caliphate. In the Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun's central theme is why nations rise to power and what causes the decline. It deals with various questions of political theory. It argues that the best type of political community is the caliphate or the Islamic State, and argues that the new Platonist political theories of Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina and the perfect state are useless because God's law, the Sharia, has been revealed to take account of public interest and the afterlife. Religion provides a surplus to the dynastic to get more loyalty from people. The second most perfect state, he argues, is one based on justice and consideration for public welfare in this life, but not based on religious law and not so beneficial to one's afterlife. Ibn Khaldun calls this state blameworthy. Yet worst type of state according to Ibn Khaldun is tyranny, wherein government usurps property rights and rules with injustice against the rights of humans. Ibn Khaldun also reflects that rise and fall according to strength of Asabiyya. In the beginning, people are not eager to give consent and loyalty, but when the entity gets strength and provides welfare to people, it begins to create a new type of group feeling. This principle, which was laid down by Ibn Khaldun, connotes that it is easy to establish a dynasty in lands which are free from group feelings. Islam has proved to be the greatest exception to this rule. However, according to Sayyid Farid Alatas, Asabiyya is not to be confined to its psychological dimension. There are also its material manifestations. Speaking about mulk or royal authority, Ibn Khaldun says that it is not merely leadership. Leadership means being a chieftain and leader is obeyed, but he has no power to force others to accept his rulings. Royal authority means superiority and the power of rule by force. A tribal chief obeyed by the tribesmen because of Asabiyya. This is a precondition for achieving royal authority. However, it is not merely the psychological feelings of cohesion that makes royal authority possible. What contributes to Asabiyya and authority wielded by the chieftain is the material standing he achieves from surpluses he appropriates from trade, plunder and pillage. Asabiyya, according to Alatas, refers to 1. Kinship ties, 2. A socially cohesive religion such as Islam, which provides a common ideology that functions to legitimize the chieftain's aspirations for mulk and the strength the chieftain acquires through trade, booty, pillage and conquest. The founding of a dynasty by a tribe sets in motion a process of social change which results in the decline of Asabiyya. There are at least two ways in which this decline is effected. One is where the second generation of tribesmen who founded the dynasty and socialized are in a new sedentary environment. Secondly, Asabiyya also declines when the ruler gains complete control over his people, claims royal authority all for himself, excluding them and prevents them from trying to have a share in it. In other words, when tribal groups establishes a dynasty and its authorities become legitimate, the ruler can afford to dispense with Asabiyya. He no longer rules with the help of his own tribesmen, but rather with those of the other tribes who become his clients. The ruler attempts to exclude his people from power. The cost is the difficulty of maintaining a decline in Asabiyya and eventually undermines the ability of the ruler to rule and weakens the state until it is finally conquered by another tribal group with superior Asabiyya, and so the cycle repeats itself. Sedentary civilization. Ibn Khaldun declared that civilization is the goal of urbanism. According to him, civilizations have lifespans like individuals, and that every state will eventually fall because sedentary luxuries distract them. And even eventually governments begin to overtax its citizens and do injustice against property rights. Injustice ruins civilizations, so eventually After one dynasty or royal authority falls, it is replaced by another in a continuous cycle. Ibn Khaldun perceives history as a cycle in which rough, nomadic peoples with high degrees of internal bonding and little material culture to lose invade and take resources from sedentary and essentially urban civilizations. These urban civilizations have high levels of wealth and culture, but are self-indulgent and lack both martial spirit and the concomitant social solidarity. This is because those qualities have become unnecessary for survival in an urban environment, and also because it is impossible for the large number of different groups that compose a multicultural city to attain the same level of solidarity as a tribe linked by blood, shared custom and survival experiences. Thus, the nomads conquer the cities and go on to be seduced by the pleasures of civilization, and in turn lose their solidarity and come under attack by the next group of rough and vigorous soldiers, and the cycle goes on and on. Crafts and the ways of making a living, or the sociology of economics. Ibn Khaldun shows the influence of economic conditions on society's condition. In the Muqaddimah, he wrote on condition and political history with Asabiya in mind, relating to the division of labor. The greater social cohesion, the more complex the division may be, the greater the economic growth. Ibn Khaldun held that population growth was the function of wealth. He noted that growth and development positively stimulate both supply and demand, and that the forces of supply and demand are what determine the prices of goods. He also noted macroeconomic forces of population and growth, human capital development, and mechanical development effect on development. He understood that money served as a standard of value, a medium of exchange, and a preserver of value, though he did not realize that the value of gold and silver changed based on the forces of supply and demand. He also introduced the labor theory of value. He describes labor as the source of value, necessary for all earnings and capital accumulation, obvious in the case of crafts. He argued that even if earning results from something other than a craft, the value of the resulting profit and acquired capital must also include the value of labor by which it was obtained. Without labor, it would not have been acquired. Another modern economic theory anticipated by Ibn Khaldun is a supply side economics. He argued that high taxes were often a factor in causing empires to collapse, with the result that lower revenue collected from high rates. Ibn Khaldun also introduced the concept of now popularly known as Laffer curve. According to this concept, increases in tax rates initially increases tax revenues, but eventually the increase in tax rates cuts a decrease in tax revenues. This occurs as too high a tax rate discourages producers in economy. He uses a dialectic approach to describe the sociological implications of tax choices, which now forms a part of economics theory. The social sciences, their acquisition and study, sociology of education. Ibn Khaldun studied educational phenomena and ways to acquire knowledge and classification of science. Though at first sight, the place held by education in Ibn Khaldun's sociology appears uncertain, to say the least. What today we understand by the term education is the replication of individuals and group, firstly at the level of values and secondly at the level of knowledge and know-how, is found in the Muqaddimah. More importantly, Ibn Khaldun makes no use of the general concept of education. His presentations of science opens with the theory of knowledge and a general presentation of the socio-historical and epistemological basis of scientific development. According to Rosenthal, the teaching of sciences is necessary for two reasons. Firstly, thorough knowledge of them requires a lengthy period of learning that can be carried out only with the help of teachers. Secondly, their very development requires them to be communicated to others. Then the sciences characterized as rational, those that people can apprehend by virtue of the very nature of thought, and the traditional, those founded upon authority, are described as to their subjects and their methods, the results and the historical development. Ibn Khaldun says, at birth we are entirely devoid of knowledge. We are still no more than raw material. We then gradually gain from thanks to the knowledge we acquire through our organs. Essentially ignorant, we fulfill ourselves as human beings only through knowledge. Ibn Khaldun distinguishes three types of knowledge corresponding as many. Degrees of thought. There is a practical knowledge, the product of discerning intelligence, which allows us to act in the world in a controlled fashion. Then a knowledge of what we must or must not do, of what is good and evil, which we acquire through empirical intelligence and which guides us in our relation with fellows. And lastly, theoretical knowledge of everything that exists in the world, which we can conquer by our speculative intelligence. Finally, it can be stated that in the area of sociology, Ibn Khaldun has tremendously contributed. It is due to these facts that he is currently the most important figure in the field of sociology in Muslim history. He is one of those shining stars that contributed so richly to the understanding of civilization. His theory about asabiya, group feelings, and the role that it plays in societies is insightful. His theories of science of Umran and all pearls of wisdom, his introduction is his greatest legacy that he left for all humanity for generations to come. Carolyn Stone rightly said, Ibn Khaldun's strength was thus not as a historian in traditional sense of a compiler of chronicles. He was the creator of a new discipline, Umran or social sciences, which treated human civilization and social facts as an interconnected whole and would help to change the way history was perceived as well as written. So to conclude, one of his major works, the Muqaddimah, he tries to understand how political processes and how the processes of division and cohesion alternatively take place in society. It is important for us to remember that Ibn Khaldun was a 14th century philosopher, historian, and a traveler. His memoirs and his travelogues and his other experiences recorded in writings express ways of understanding society that probably was far beyond the science of his time.